We certainly need a price on carbon, but it's important to understand what the role of the price on carbon. The price on carbon is to get people who decide to build energy plants to look out at their returns over a 40 or 50-year period and choose clean sources. And so it's not that important what the carbon tax is today. In fact, with a fragile economy, it'd be hard to argue that's what's important. It helps only in the most modest sort of demand suppression mode. What's key is the carbon tax in the 20 to 50-year period, and can politicians do something today that would make it crystal clear to a risk taker that there's going to be a substantial carbon tax during the relevant time period, so that if I'm innovating in power plants today, for people who buy power plants 10 years from now, their equation will favor the clean technology. The American Energy Innovation Council is about the thing that is urgent today, which is getting the revenue base to essentially double the science spending on energy, including ARPA-E, including Office of Science. And there, our timing wasn't exactly perfect in terms of the pressures on the budget and the open-mindedness to new taxes. It wasn't really that great. What we said is that by putting a 2% tax on energy consumption, you could fund this additional scientific investment, and it would have a very good payback. It would be great for the country, great for the world. And we met with a lot of people. The president was great. He met with us and said, of course, this makes sense. But in the gridlock that we have today on this, the likelihood of that kind of allocation, including the tax revenue that would support it, is very low. And that is deeply unfortunate. And that group is going to continue to advocate that we're underspending. Perhaps the only effect we'll have is that these budgets won't be cut. And I guess that's better than nothing.
But Steve, I want to add to that, and going back to how important research and development is for our future, because what we're focused on in the Department of Energy is how do you reduce the cost of clean energy? How do you reduce the cost of efficiency so it even pays for itself in a faster, shorter amount of time? Those things are the things that will really drive the adoption. I talked about, in my remarks about the automobile, that was a superior technology, and very rapidly realized it was a superior technology, and that drove the adoption very quickly. So if one can get wind and solar and energy storage down to where the whole package is cost competitive with any form of energy, then it takes off. And this is what we're very focused on in the Department of Energy. We want these things without subsidy just to take off.
Yeah, and I do think people, when you're talking about power that's nearby, power that's available 24 hours a day, people underestimate how far away we are. Even the dollar a watt thing, that's intermittent energy, and that's energy where there's sun. That's very different than base load energy near to where it's being consumed. So if we underestimate how hard it is, your goal is exactly right. But if we estimate how hard it is, that's partly why we can end up underfunding the kind of innovative work that needs to go on.
I want to come to some specific technologies and get to the baseload question. We had an interesting conversation about nuclear power backstage, but your TED wish last year was zero carbon by 2050, half the price of carbon-based energy. Are we anywhere near the level of R&D, business investment, venture investment, business startup that would actually get you to imagine that we could hit that wish by 2050?
Well, I think we run a much higher risk that we won't get the breakthroughs because we're underspending. And the amount that we need to spend as a percentage of the budget, military costs, anything you look at is very, very small. There's no clear mapping between the amount you spend on R&D and what you get out. For all we know, there could be 4 or 5 companies that will come out with the pieces that are necessary that already have plenty of funds. I think it's more likely that the underfunding is delaying the pace of progress. Remember, the failure rates here are going to be well over 90%. When you go out and look at batteries in that hallway, if you can find the 1 out of 10, great. Go ahead and invest in it. That's a great thing. But this is a very complex set of technologies, and so we need literally thousands of companies to be trying these things to increase the odds that we'll have the 10 or 20 approaches that will get us the magic solution. So people like Schmill, who are very responsibly look at this thing, would say, no, we're not going to hit that the number of pieces that have to fall into place are very, very large. Then again, when you meet with the companies, you see the energy, and you see the shift of IQ and money that there's a lot more activity now because of things like ARPA-E than there was even 5 years ago. You definitely feel good about that very smart people are coming to this, that the problem is being better characterized than it was in the past. So I'd give us an A for moving into the space. But the magnitude, I still think, is not a serious level.
Underfunding on both the public and private side.
Well, the private sector will do what it wants to do. It will look at the incentives that are out there. More private money has come in as the opportunity's been recognized. But with the right policy framework, you can increase that substantially. In a long term, 20 to 50 years serious tax on carbon, say, $40 a ton, $30 a ton, would change the way private sector dollars are spent.
Steve, you want to?
Well, I'm not going to use the T word, but I think it is important. I agree with Bill entirely that these long-term signals, you don't need a signal in the next, we don't want it, right now we're trying to get out of a recession, but the long-term signal 20, 30, 40 years from today is very important. And it's that long-term signal. It could be a modest long-term signal that says, all right, this is the direction we're marching, that would actually spur investment. And I think that is an important part of that. But it doesn't have to be a big signal. It just says we're firm. This is what's going to happen. It's like the miles per gallon thing, 55 miles per gallon. It's somewhat off in the future, but this, in many respects, is a very good thing, because when that went through, the automobile companies said, all right, now we have to have a game plan. The engineers in the oil companies were very excited because they love to engineer to something better. But it's going to be very good because it means that cars built in America could be marketed around the world. And that's a very big deal. You can't really, it's very difficult, except for a few rare instances, to sell an automobile that gets 10 or 15 miles to a gallon as a mass market outside the world. But there are many people who would buy a good, high-performing 40-mile-a-gallon and 55-mile-a-gallon car. And what Detroit has shown is that once it recognizes this, they begin to make cars in Detroit, in Illinois, and other places around the country that can be marketed elsewhere. You make the car here, you sell it abroad.
Including the controls, the materials, everything
right.
that goes into it.
And all the things, the materials, the development of the engines, all these things, all of a sudden you see going in a different trajectory, which in the end I think would be very good for the U.S.
Let's talk about a couple of specific technologies. I mentioned nuclear. Bill, you're involved with TerraPower, which is
a nuclear startup company.
A nuclear startup, traveling wave reactor. Talk a little bit about what the strategy is with TerraPower in terms of where it's positioned vis-a-vis the rest of the nuclear industry.
Well, in terms of the magic position we want to get into, unless you can take hydrocarbons and do extreme capture and storage, or unless the sort of energy farming, solar biofuels, and all of the issues with that work out, then you've got nuclear as the one left. And I think we should bet on all of these. And I think in each area we should have ideally hundreds of companies betting on them. Nuclear, there hasn't been a lot of innovation. That is, in the industry essentially shut down in the 1970s. There have been small refinements since then. Now we have an age where the ability to simulate lots of things, whether it's diesel engines or what goes on inside a nuclear reactor, is utterly different. And so there's some ideas, including the one we're pursuing, where you get 20 times as much energy out of the fuel as today's reactor. You get less waste, you get better economics, you get less proliferation, better economics being the sort of the key thing there, and you get nuclear energy that's very cheap. At the basic level, when you have fission, you get 1 million times more energy than when you burn a hydrocarbon. And so you think, wow, that's a nice advantage. We're 1 million times better. Now, we have to build all these expensive safety, anti-radiation things, and right now, that factor of 1 million more than gets used up. Current designs are not competitive with coal or particularly $2.50 TCU natural gas. That is very cheap energy.